At the beginning of the 20th century, Steven Stieber and Maria Salinkova came to America from Czechoslovakia, which at that time was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They married in 1904 and raised a family of 6 children: Cele, Steve, Paul, John, Mary, and Agnes. This is their story, told by John, born August 18, 1914.
People lived, people loved, people survived.
Steven, born October 9, 1908.
Well, it's not hard to remember.
And Cele, the eldest, born June 21, 1906.
You're getting all the dirt.
Story is told with guest appearances by John's wife Ann and Steve's wife Josie.
Originally, the Stiebers came from Germany. They were living outside of Dresden, and he was the original Stieber that started this line of Stiebers. He was a landowner, and he had sons. One of the sons' name was Wendell, one of the sons was George, and one was Stephen. There were 3 sons. And you know what? When they were never raised to work because they were landowners, you know, they had peasants working for them. And what happened was the old man died. When he died, they found out that he had gambled away all their money, everything. There was nothing left. He had gambled away, and he was a drunk. You know, he had all his hoi polloi friends with liquor parties and stuff. The 3 sons were very angry. They had nothing. So one went with the Habsburgs to Austria, and he became something in the military there for Francis Joseph. Another one went to Austria-Hungary, but he was a hunter. He liked to hunt, and when he was by his father, they had great big woods, and he would go hunt in the woods, and the Black Forest, and they would hunt. So he went in what's now Czechoslovakia. At that time was Austria-Hungary. He went up there, and when he was through the woods, what happened? He fell in love with a girl, a peasant girl, and he married her. He had a son. He had several sons, and these sons all were tradespeople. One was a stonemason, 2 of them were stonemasons, and they were carpenters and stonemasons, you know, like that.
Our name actually is Stieber.
Yeah.
So this guy, if you remember at Metro when we used to go, he used to weigh and take your temperature.
Yeah.
And he was the only guy, and he had talked with a German accent. And he came, when he came to call me, he said, Stieber, just perfectly. So.
Well, okay, well, how do we get one like that?
I don't know.
We had a portrait about this size, this high, and this wide. It was hanging on a wall in our living room. And it was a picture of Francis Joseph, Austro-Hungarian Emperor, and Kaiser Wilhelm. And they were standing together, shaking hands, and behind each one was their flag, you know. Well, anyway, when the war broke out, in Europe, the First World War, my father told me right off the bat, take that picture off the wall and hide it. You did away with anything that had German or Austrian pictures, flags, any kind of memorabilia that you had, you destroyed it or you hid it. And if you had a name, you changed it. Because if you didn't, they would break your windows, they would beat you up by Upsonut over there in the, by the tracks down the hill. They beat a man almost to death because he was German. You remember the Second World War? No, you don't. You were too young. You weren't even born. How they were against Japanese, you know? Well, that was the same way, see, of what a German. So that's when my Uncle Joe, he went and put two E's in his Stieber, and my father just added another E. He couldn't get rid of the I because he was a loyal citizen of United States, but he was also a loyal lover of Franz Joschko, you know, Francis Joseph.
Every Slovak family, or, you know, ethnic family had Kansas kids. I don't care whether you're Jewish, Slovak, Hungarian, or what. If you came from the old country, you didn't know about these things, you know, so you had big families.
What did they do back in Europe? They were all farmers.
A lot of guys, when their parents died, why one of the brothers or one of the children got the farm and the others had to go. Well, most of them went to Argentina because there was a big settlement there, and also the climate was very much favorable to the one that they were raised in.
Naturally, America is paved with gold.
See, in those days when you became of age and you wanted to go to America, you didn't just pack up and go. You had to come under a quota.
Yeah.
And the quota was, say, from Slovakia, maybe they're going to let 50 go this year. So your name is in there, and you put your name in there. Well, a lot of the guys had to wait as much 5, 6 years before their time came up. And in the meantime, if they found somebody to marry or that they didn't want it, why then somebody else that was further down the list would ask them for their quota name and number, and they would come in on that name.
Well, didn't your father do that?
Yeah, that's how my father got here. He made it, I don't know how, but he came in under somebody else's quota.
Well, most of the Slovaks, when they come over here, they either went to Indiana
That's where
or to Pittsburgh, to either the steel mills or the coal mines. There was not much of a choice. You take immigrants coming in, it was the only choice they had. Steel mills or coal mines.
Why only those? Because it was unskilled labor?
Yeah. And well, my father didn't have to do that. My father was a carpenter here in the old country. He was a carpenter here. Went to work for the railroad. First he went to Lorraine. Then I don't know what happened over there. His brother was there, my Uncle Joe.
Well, there was this Andy, John, Julius, and Joe.
Oh my gosh,
Four.
I never knew that. And where were they all?
Well, all of them were here except Andy.
And he went to Germany.
Yeah, there was a domestic squabble of some kind. I don't know exactly what. And so he just packed up and he said he's going to Germany, and just was never heard from again. All the brothers came here, one by one or however, but they settled in Lorraine.
My great-grandfather was a stonemason. So was my grandfather. So was my Uncle Joe Stieber, the one who got the 2 E's.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a stonemason. My father was a carpenter and a hooper. He used to make these big vats for wine and for beer, you know, where they aged the stuff. He could make that. He used to go to the different cities to make them.
They worked, I think, for B&O or must have been New York Central though, but the company was going to fold up. And Uncle Joe and Uncle Julius, they worked repairing steel cars, what they called coal gondolas. And my father repaired the wooden box cars. And when they were going to close, why, they were given an opportunity to be transferred either to Ashtabula, Cleveland, or Toledo. The reason that they chose Cleveland was because they knew more people here.
And got that job there with the New York Central on the railroad, carpenter. And that's where he stayed until he retired.
And then we had a Uncle John, my father's brother John. He committed suicide. He found out you're getting all the dirt. He was a businessman. He went in he was very friendly with a fella in a town in Sabino. And this fella, they got together and they started a paper factory. Till one time, they claimed that somebody was jealous. They set the place on fire and burned. So he came to America to earn some money to go back to Europe to rebuild the factory. Meanwhile, his partner was also working towards rebuilding the factory. Well, while my Uncle John was here in America, his wife got very cozy with a professor of a high school, in the gymnasia, they call it. There was people coming from Europe all the time at that time. And every time they would see him, they would laugh, you know, and look at each other and make snide remarks. And he'd say, "What's the matter? Were you guys making fun of me? Well, what's so funny?" You know. And then finally one of them blurted out, "Wait till you get home. You're going to find the cow has a calf." His wife was pregnant by the professor. When they told him that, and like I told you, he drank on weekends. During the week he was sober, but on weekends he hit the bottle. And this was Christmas. New Year's, not Christmas. Silvestre, you know, that's the last day of the year. All the paisano, you know, all the craiani, the towns, they were very close. It was a small town. Anyways, they were all together by this house. And when this fella told him this, then my Uncle John went and he got drunk and he went out, and there was a real blizzard blowing, snow and wind. And he walked at a corner from that house. I could just picture it on West 25th Street or East 25th Street. He was walking like towards the corner, and on a corner was Chapla's grocery store, and at that time was horses, and they had a delivery wagon, you know, and they had a horse, they had a barn. So he stops before he hits the corner, crawls up into that barn, up on the loft, in the hayloft, took his belt and hung himself by his belt in that hayloft, right in front of that open window. You know how they have that opening? In the morning, altar boys are going to church for first mass. They're making snowballs, you know, and they're walking towards the church. The church was a kitty corner across the street from the grocery store. When one of the kids throws a snowball through that opening in the barn, when he threw the snowball, the snow fell off, and he sees it's a man. Well, they got scared. They run like hell, you know, and they told the priest what they saw. He couldn't believe him, you know. Anyhow, he went. It was just across the street, and they found him. He actually suffocated, you know, because anyways, he died. And Mary, his daughter, which my father was bringing to America, she was on a boat on her way to America. So he died on January the 1st, and she came in January to America. And her father was gone. And I remember the day when they came. That was 1914, January the 1st. And they were knocking on a window, Mr. Shestak and Mr. Petia. And my father opened the door. He said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" He said, "Your brother's dead."
Julius, that's Tony's father, they lived here in Lorraine, and he was married in Lorraine, and Tony was born here. But then the mother decided she didn't like America and she wanted to go back. So she went back to, well, it was then Austria. Well, after so long, this Julius, her husband, decided to go there too. But no more than he got there, he was drafted into the Army.
Oh.
And when he was drafted into the Army, shortly after, he was captured and was sent to Siberia.
Oh my God.
And they got a couple of letters from him from Siberia, and then they lost track of him.
My father didn't drink. Occasionally in the wintertime when he had a long walk from the streetcar home, it was cold. He had a pint of booze in the house there, and my mother would pour him out a shot. He'd have a shot of whiskey. That was the extent of his drinking. I'm surprised that all of us boys over there wound up to be drunk. But that was the extent of that. Never smoked. He said the first time he tried it, he went back and was shed someplace and he got sick. He says, what's this mean? He said he didn't need that. Never smoked, drank very little. His brother Joe, the one that used to give me dank along with his other kids, he drank like a fish. Smoked, rolled his own cigarettes, his fingers were all from nicotine, nothing but filters these days, you know. All smoked up. He lived to be 85. My father lived to be 84.
50-50 chance.
Extra year with that.
So much for clean living.
My mother, you know, she was a peculiar woman. She was very smart and very wide open.
My father came here when he was single, and then he sent for my mother, and she was single too, and then they got married here in Lorain, Ohio.
When she was coming from Europe in 1903, she was, they were coming in January, at terrible storms at sea. They were on the ocean over 2 weeks. You know, they were in a steerage. They were sleeping in hammocks one above each other. And she said, she told me that she was vomiting and the person above her was vomiting right past her face. And she was so sick they thought she was going to die, so the people all were complaining over there. So they carried her upstairs onto the deck and they left her there. They thought she was going to die. And she, from exposure, she got rheumatic fever. She was terribly afraid that they wouldn't let her stay in America. But it so happened that in 1903 and in 1904, that so many people had become sick on the ocean that they were, the only thing they looked for was tuberculosis and pink eye. You know, that's two catchy disease and the rest. So they passed my mother up. My mother came to America in 1903. They got married in 1904, in April. I got their wedding certificate. Where it was folded, it had come apart. But it could be pasted on a straight thing. I got it on a cardboard. They were married in St. Martin's Church by Father Horak. I was godmother for a baby by Father Horak. Boy, he was a terror. He didn't mince any words. Anyway, they were married by Father Horak. When my mother came to America, Slovak people, Polish people, there were the Irish and the Italians were here before them. And talk about racism or whatever. My mother was stoned how many times. One time when they were throwing rocks at her, she ran and she got to the railroad track. She didn't know where she was. And she finally ended up by Public Square. And she, on 9th Street, she was looking for a church. She wanted to go to church on Sunday. And that's when they stoned her. So she finally saw there was a church there, and she saw the statue of a bishop. So she knew that was, so she went to church. And then she just walked by instinct. She somehow got home.
Well, my mother talked about her parents, yeah. Well, more, not so much about her parents as much as about her brother and sister. Like that priest that came here. Well,
What was he to her?
a cousin.
Oh.
And see, where they lived, there was no such a thing as indoor plumbing, and probably not even an outdoor, because we used to ask her where did they go, whether they had a outhouse. I said, no, you just went on the manure pile.
Oh, jeez.
So,
She's getting that on there.
anyhow, when somebody would get a cold, and they wouldn't call that, you had a blocked up nose. So, I don't know, she used to call it natka. So, to break that, my mother said they would take flat stones and make like a little oven and make a fire on the inside and get a fresh turd and put it on
Boy, that
the,
would break anybody's steak.
and put it on the top stone and let it get hot and then smell it, and she said, boy, that would break your nut.
Now we know where all this lung problem is.
Now you got to the bottom of it. Better tell your doctor about it.
Where a lot of
Yeah, right.
if you would be buzzing around or doing something, he's buzzing like a green fly on a fresh turd. That's one of her expressions.
No,
You were mouthy and your mouth was going all the time. His mouth goes like a duck's rear end. It's always wagging. She had expressions for everything. Goes out the door and don't close it. I hope your rear end don't close any better than that.
That's where that expression came from?
Yeah.
In 1905, she had a girl, and the girl weighed 16 pounds, and she couldn't be born. They had no cesarean section, and my mother was terribly hurt, and the baby was killed. They yanked her out with forceps, they broke her neck, and she was still moving her arms, but she was dying when she was born. My father baptized her Anna. A year and a half later, or a year later, she had a boy. Same thing. The child this time was 15 pounds. And my mother said that when they put him on a kitchen table, his heels hung off. That's how big he was. And then the doctor told her that if she ever gets pregnant again, she has to come to him, and he's going to put her on a diet. What a diet. We're all suffering. We all lost our teeth. He put her on a diet with no meat, no milk, and there was nothing calcium. You know what my mother ate while she was pregnant with me? Dumplings, halushki. Halushki and black tea. I was born 14 and a half pounds, but with no problems. I was long like a violin. I had my bones, but you know what? That I wasn't born on a bed. My mother was in labor. She sent a boy, neighbor boy, to get my father. They lived close to his factory, and my father came home on a bicycle. You know, he had a bike. He come home, and she told him she's in labor, that he should go and get the midwife. Well, you know what? She said, she was making supper. She said, wait a minute till I drain the noodles. And she said, help me on a pot, I gotta go. They didn't have a inside toilet, you know, and you couldn't go in a privy when you're in labor, outdoors. They had you have porta potties today?
Chamber pot, yeah?
Yeah, chamber pot, but it looked, we had a thing, my mother used to laugh because we used to have pickles in it, you know, and Ma said every time I look at it, she said it looks like that pot. Anyway, she went on that pot, and that's where I was born. And my father, she grabbed me, and my father carried both of us, me half out and half in, and he put us on a bed. He called the old lady downstairs to come by my mother, and she took the child, you know, so that she wouldn't choke. And my father didn't get the midwife, but he got the doctor. The doctor came and he took care of my mother. And after that, she had the children normally, but all of us were big.
One time my father's sitting by the table and he's sitting on the other end, and my sister and I on the floor, she was cutting out junk with scissors, but not really cutting her out, just monkeying around with scissors.
Which sister, ain't you?
And so she says, this is the way a stepmother cuts. And my mother said, don't say that because I think you're going to have one. See, and she already
Your
then,
mother knew that she was going to die?
she figured she didn't have long to go.
People today who are 60 years old, 70 years old, and they come to me and they say, I remember your mother, always with kindness, during the flu in 1918, with her arthritic legs, pregnant. And she was going, taking care of people that were laying in bed, whole families with the flu. And she got one pot of soup off the stove and put another one on. She took soup to all these people because that's all they could stomach. And nobody died. And people were poor. And you know what, when you work for $1 a day, you had no money to give $1 to the doctor. So when the kids got sick, they would call my mother. She was the only one who was like me. I inherited her thing for books. Bookworm. She got stuck in Slovakia. From Europe she would get them. All over. So anybody, how many times my father said to her, because she said somebody would come call, was already close to sleep time, and he said, you're going out again. And she says, what can I do? She said, somebody's got the pot. She said, can't they call somebody else? She said, do you have to be there when they first opened their eyes to the world and to close them when they died? But you see, honey, people trusted her.
I was always the youngest guy in school. My birthday comes in October, and school starts September after Labor Day.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't going to let me start until the following year because I wasn't 6.
Even way back then they did that.
Yeah, so my father raised quite a rumpus with the priest and whatnot, and
Why do you want to get rid of
so
you?
they decided to take me in. So if I was 6, then 8 years in school, so I was 14 when I graduated from 8th grade.
Yeah.
And then I went to St. Ignatius. So again, over there I was the youngest kid.
Yeah.
And it was while I was in first year high that my mother died, and because the whole class with our Latin teacher, he was a Jesuit, and they walked, well, in those days everybody walked.
Yeah, you walked everywhere.
Yeah, so they walked from there to our house on 19th Street. He took the whole class and they set a rose tree, and I know she died in 1923, February the 23rd.
Mary looks just like her. She looks like her. Aunt Mary?
She was 38 years old when she died. She had born 11 children by then.
11 children.
Six survived. My mother had heart disease ever since I was little. That's where my sister Cele came in. When my mother got really sick, for a year or two before she finally died, my sister took care of all that. She was like a mother to me, not a sister. I was 6 years old when my mother got sick, or really sick. 8 years old when she died. So my sister Cele was mama. I know that I called her mama, but that she took on the duties of mother. I owe her an awful lot.
I'm proud of our family. My brothers and sisters, I promised my mother that I would look after the kids. She said to me, so none of them should end up in jail. Well, Agnes is going to have her 50th wedding anniversary in May. Your father's over 50, 52. Steve is 60. No divorces. Everybody was living a decent life. My mother died at 38. And she left me with 2 babies and 3 brothers and a promise. And I kept it. And that's how it was.
Sunday afternoons, I wanted a dime to go see the show. I didn't have, like I say, an allowance. None of the kids had. And my father was dead on any kind of work on Sundays. Sunday was Sunday. And so there used to be daily papers with 2 cents at that time. And on Sunday they came out with in fact the name of the paper was Star. And it was a sort of like a sleazy magazine, like something like that. So, but they charged a nickel for that. And I'd get 2 cents a sheet, 2 cents for every paper I sold.
Right.
And on Sundays, my father had a habit. He would call. He used to tell us not to put circle, and he was going to take us after dinner walk. And so he was taking it. But in the meantime, I had run up to 25th and Lauren. That was 2 converging main streets here in the corner. And I was selling these Star papers. And he came along. Oh, he bawled the hell out of me. He didn't hit me or anything out there in the corner, but all that on, how come I'm doing this on something like this, and I want to wind up in hell or what the hell. And I said, well, gee, I just want a dime to go to the show. And I could see him standing there in front of me, he reaches into his pocket, and he comes out one of the leather coin purses, and he opened that up like if it was opening up a safe on Monday morning in a bank. And he looked in there and come out with a couple of nickels, Here, go give those papers to the man that gave them to you. So I had to take the papers back. He gave me a dime, and off I went to the show. But yeah, he was. I don't know. I guess it was necessary over there. Give me a dime to go to a show. That means he couldn't buy a loaf of bread for the rest of the people. Stuff like that. I suppose that's what he had on his mind. I didn't think of these. But my Uncle Joe was a drunk, and he was a widower, and he had a gang of kids too, my cousins. But he was a lot more generous than my father was with his kids. On Sunday after dinner, we went over their house. After dinner, and the kids washed the dishes and stuff over there, and he's sitting in his chair, and the kids would line up and go get their dimes for the show, this one. So I used to go over there and get at the end of the line. Hoping he'd have another dime.
Never know.
Well, most of the time I got my dime.
You do?
But it was between the you had to con your way through there if you wanted to get a little enjoyment in life.
Yeah.
When we got on the train to go to Prague, my grandmother didn't want me to go with my mom and dad because I had 2 brothers being left behind, And my grandmother didn't need it. She was glad that the 2 boys were staying, but she wanted me to stay too. So when we got on the train, all of a sudden the little old lady, she grabs me by my hand and she takes me off the train. And here my mom, I don't know where she came from, and she saw me marching with my grandmother. She had me by my hand and she's marching with me and she's taking me home. So then my mom grabbed me and brought me back, put me on the train, and from that time on I was being watched all the time.
You've been escapee all your life.
Escapee all my life. So then finally when we got to America, well, there's some people from Burndale, I was from that neck of woods where you was working
Oh,
there.
from Pennsylvania?
Weedville.
Pennsylvania. Weedville.
Weedville? Have to go through Weedville,
Mhm.
where these people were.
My dad was a coal miner.
Oh.
Down where Jim's talking about. Pennsylvania. Well, anyhow, they came to New York. I saw the Statue of Liberty. In America, just a little bit. I just said, oh, statue. I didn't get too excited about it. But anyhow, when we got off the boat and then we went into depot, like, and here these people come to meet us, and this lady, friend of theirs, brought some bananas. Well, she gave bananas to my mom, and she never saw bananas before, and she didn't know whether we should eat it with the skins or peel. So anyhow, we went to like a hotel together until we got away to come to this town that he's talking about, and they took us to their house and we stayed there a few days, and then we had to go to Bitumen because my dad, he got another job. You know, it was going to be coal mining, but clean chimneys.
Oh.
Yeah.
A sweep.
So, yeah, that. So that's what he was.
What did your dad do in the old country?
He was a drotar.
Yeah, it's considered, see, in Europe, everybody has to have a trade. You don't just quit school and then you become a nutter. And you
That's
always
where we
have
get
to
that
serve
from.
an apprenticeship.
He was really
And
like a bum traveling
at that time, there was no big unions or that. If you was going to be a tailor, you would go to a tailor, and you would stay in his house. And the first year you wouldn't get paid your learning. Then you got a little bit, and you had to put in 4 years of training. Then you became a full-fledged, either be a tailor, baker, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the ones that didn't do that, they became drotars. And it's a fella that works with wire. And in those days, in those days there was much of the cooking utensils and
Pottery.
pottery
Yeah.
used around the house was made from that stuff. And if it broke, why, they were quite expensive to replace, to buy a new one. And these guys were able to piece them together, and then they made like a web out of wire, and they would put it together, and it was serviceable again. When they got through, it's like that bag of onions that you buy with them holes in it.
Yeah.
Well, that wire would look like that on the outside, and held all them chips together.
Oh my God. They didn't use glue or anything, just this way.
Nothing, just that.
He didn't stick with that very long. Of course, he got my mother pregnant.
You're talking like Grandpa.
2 brothers.
Your mother didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, those guys used to be like, you probably remember the umbrella menders that used to go up and down the street.
He was a bum.
Well, these guys would go up and down the street and shouting, Harchki, Miski, Sherpinki, Drutovac.
What does that mean?
Announce themselves, and if somebody had a piece of crockery to repair. It isn't necessarily all of it was in big chips. Sometimes only 2 pieces, broken in 2 or something. That was my father used to always laugh like that. Oh, he's one of these Archki, Miski, Sherpinki, Drutovac.
Everybody and his brothers, including the Fraternal Order of Police, the dog catchers, the, what do you call, for animals, Protective League, everybody and his brother, all kinds of people that I never heard of, all kinds of associations, even cancer people, heart people, everybody wants money. And would you please remember us in your will? Send me leaflets how to make a will. You know, I think that's crass. Now, for me, I'm not squeamish about dying, but some people are. Now imagine what it does to you, you know? And that bugs me. And I thought to myself, where do they get all the names? You get all kinds of stuff from all kinds of things that you never heard of. Down south, some association you never heard of. Better Life for Appalachian, the Virginia Miners, what do you call it? Union. Everybody and their brother and everybody. Remember us in your will. They are on my estate. Oh, brother.
We didn't have electricity or gas, and my mother had to cook on a coal stove and stuff like this. So whenever us kids would go play near the railroad tracks over there, get through with a ball game or whatever, and we all had brought sacks along with us. So when the ball game was over, we'd walk along the track and fill up these coal sacks, you know, taking a help out at home. Then we used to go to a place to swim, skinny dipping, over at Whiskey Island, they called it. Supposedly during Prohibition, why the bootleggers from Canada ran booze to this island. And, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, we go over there skinny dipping. And on the way back, it was down in a hole in the valley there with the Cuyahoga River, and we lived on top of the hill. So on the way back, there were lumber yards and box companies, and so there was one lumber yard that I used to pick up good scrap lumber over there and bring it home. We'd always have a wagon with us. But, some made this trip at one time, and I saw some guy furtively going into this building. So they had a window there where a window had been. It was just an empty square, you know. And so peeking in over there, and here the guy must have, just shortly after lunch, and the guy must have bought a bottle of booze, quart, and he hid it under the board. And he picked it up over there, took it around, and took a swig, and I put it back and shut it. So I'm watching this. As soon as the guy walks off, you know, and I waited a few minutes, I went in there and I swiped the booze. And I knew this bootlegger. A quart of booze at that time was like maybe $2 for it. So I sold it for $1. Goodbye for that guy, you know. So I'm at home there. By that time I had a stepmother. Mean old bag. And a stepbrother. And we're eating supper, and I'm just dying to tell about my experiences, but I didn't want to say that I got $1 because they would take it away from me.
Yeah.
And no way was this going to happen, you know. So I'm telling them the story over there. Yeah, well, what did you do with the whiskey? I didn't bring it home. I said, I gave it to a policeman. Oh, you stupid! This and that. You and that.
Should have sold it.
Well, it comforted me because I had that $1 in my pocket. Well, your folks were married in Europe, though.
Well, they had 3 kids in Europe,
I know.
so they had to be married there. John was born in 1907. Mary was born in 1909, and Louis either, I think in 10, not 10, but 11 or 12. My father must have came here about 1912, 1913, something like that.
What did he do for a living back in Europe and when he came here?
What did they do back in Europe? They were all farmers. And naturally, America is paved with gold. So he came to America, and went to either St. Louis or Chicago. Didn't stay there too long and ended up in Pittsburgh in the steel mills there. So, and that's when he sent for Grandma then too to come, and she came with the three little ones. So
it was a grimy town. Those steel mills belching smoke, you know, and polluting so on.
The house I was born in, this one street here, you come, there's a level. It was 5 stories high, and something like the flea market up in Seattle.
Yeah.
Everything
on the street, yeah.
It went off. You come to a platform, and there was one floor there. You went up another flight, another floor. So that's how this house was built too. And
a lot of it was like L.A. Oh, there are 1 or 2 corners of the house are in the hill, and the other 2 corners are on stilts. You know.
Well, this house was all in the hill like this, and all came out front like that. So the lower one was, I think, only 2 or 3 rooms. Then the second one had a little more room, and as it went up like that.
Were we ever back? I think we stopped there a couple of times.
Where?
Where your old homestead.
Barkville?
On Barkville, yeah.
Yeah, we were there, but that...
I don't think the house was there then.
No, because they bought all that up, and Mother was the last one to finally give in. My 2 brothers and another fellow were holding arena roast.
That's kind of interesting place to meet.
And that was Sunita, what a young beauty.
You told her you like her buns?
I didn't want to have anything to do with him.
Oh, come on.
You know that.
You didn't have nothing to do with me. How come you let me come to see you?
Yeah, after, by the end of the night there.
Oh.
I didn't want to have anything to do with you from the beginning.
Finally, my charms got to you.
No, I didn't, dear.
I don't know how the hell we wound up at that Wiener Rose.
Oh.
Because they were all East Siders, and Andy Grimsey and I were West Siders.
Andy Grimsey went to the ballroom and met the Hank and Freddie Stacy.
Oh, is that how it was?
Yes. And they sold him tickets.
My God, your brothers were doing a Wiener Roast that you had to pay to come to?
Well, yes. When you went to those outings, my God, we used to have well over 50 people there. You can...
Oh.
Well, just like a clam bake. What the hell? You don't get in there for free.
No, I didn't know. I was thinking of something going on in the backyard.
No, we were way out. God knows where. I don't remember.
I don't even remember where. But this just shows you the fickle finger of fate. And then it's East Sider and West Sider. I had to get papers to bring around the West Side.